Ladies and gentlemen, something just changed. Not just a headline, not just another flash of breaking news. This moment, is history being written in real time. Iran has struck a U.S. base. The world is holding its breath. The fear of a third world war is no longer hypothetical. It's a conversation around dinner tables, in the silence of command centers, in the pulse of global markets, in the hearts of soldiers and civilians alike. But I want to offer you a perspective you won't hear on the news, because this is not the time for panic. This is not the time to run. This is the time to remember who we are and why we exist. Every generation is tested. And no, we do not choose our crises. We do not get to decide when the storm comes, but we always get to choose who we become in the face of it. This is not just about politics, power, or missiles. This is about purpose. It's about leadership in the face of chaos. It's about how nations, businesses, families, even individuals respond when the world tilts off its axis. You see, fear is loud. It screams. It paralyzes. It tells us to protect ourselves, to hide, to fight without thinking, to react without principle. But the opposite of fear is not bravery. The opposite of fear is clarity. And in moments like this, clarity becomes our most powerful weapon. We often imagine that strength is born in times of peace, that greatness is cultivated in moments of quiet triumph. But history tells us something different. The truth is, we are shaped and defined not when everything is going according to plan, but when everything breaks. When the world is on fire, when the news flashes red with words like asterisk, attack asterisk, asterisk, war asterisk, and asterisk, fear asterisk, that's when the deepest part of us is called forward. Crisis has a way of revealing who we really are. It doesn't create weakness, it exposes it, and more importantly, it highlights the strength that's been waiting, often dormant, inside us. In this current moment, where an Iranian strike has shaken global stability, it's easy to get caught in the fear, to allow the headlines to hijack our thinking. But let's remember something powerful. Our circumstances don't write our character. We write it ourselves. This isn't about politics. It's not about strategy on a map. This is about people. This is about resilience. And this is about choice. Because no matter how explosive the event, no matter how massive the scale of disruption, the one thing that remains fully in our control is how we respond. And response is everything. It sets the tone. It determines the direction. It decides whether we are ruled by chaos or guided by purpose. When pressure mounts, some people retreat, some freeze, and others rise. Not because they have all the answers, but because they understand that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to act in spite of it. Responding with strength doesn't mean yelling louder or striking harder. It means standing taller. It means asking, who do I need to be in this moment? What values do I hold that won't crumble even when everything else does? The greatest leaders of our time didn't emerge from luxury or comfort. They emerged from trial. They walked through fire with clarity in their eyes and mission in their hearts. They saw chaos not as a threat, but as a test. And they passed because they chose conviction over convenience. This is that kind of moment. It doesn't matter if you're a student, a soldier, a CEO, a teacher, or a parent. Every person watching this global situation unfold has a choice to make, to panic or to pause, to react or to reflect, to add to the noise or to be a steady voice in the middle of it. Our instincts might scream for retaliation or defense, but somewhere beneath the instinct is a deeper voice, a quieter one, that says, "What I do now will matter tomorrow." That voice is reason. That voice is responsibility. And that voice is the beginning of leadership, because true leaders aren't just born in calm, they're revealed in crisis. And every moment of pressure is an invitation, not to collapse, but to come alive, to show the world what we stand for, and to answer challenge with character. Fear has a way of amplifying everything. It takes a whisper of uncertainty and turns it into a scream. It distorts perspective, clouds judgment, and feeds on our most primal instincts. When something massive and disruptive occurs, like a military strike, a potential escalation to global war, the emotional reaction is immediate and visceral. Fear doesn't wait for facts. It doesn't care about context. It seizes the moment and fills the space with panic. And the louder fear gets, the more difficult it becomes to hear anything else. That's when the real danger begins, not just the threat on the outside, but the unraveling from within. But there is something even more powerful than fear, and that is clarity. Clarity doesn't shout, it doesn't compete, it waits, it listens, it speaks when we are ready to hear, and when it comes, it brings with it direction, focus, and truth. Clarity is not the absence of danger. It is the ability to see through the danger. While fear blinds us with emotion, clarity restores our vision with purpose. And in the middle of any crisis, especially one as volatile and emotionally charged as a possible global conflict, clarity becomes a strategic necessity, not a luxury. Clarity doesn't come from headlines or from hysteria. It comes from within. It is born out of self-awareness, reflection, and values. It asks us not, what are they doing, but who are we going to be? It brings us back to first principles. Why do we exist? What are we here to protect? What future do we want to create? Not just for ourselves, but for others. These aren't easy questions, but they are essential, because fear will push us toward reaction. It will tell us to strike back, to move fast, to retaliate without thought. Clarity says, wait, think, choose. And in the space between fear and clarity, the entire trajectory of our response is decided. The most effective leaders in history didn't operate from a place of panic. They operated from a place of perspective. They didn't ignore the gravity of the moment, but they refused to be owned by it. They were calm when others were chaotic. They were decisive when others were paralyzed. And that strength came from clarity, not because they had perfect information, but because they had a clear sense of who they were and what they stood for. They understood that in times of war or crisis, what you do matters, but what you believe matters even more. In every high-stakes moment, clarity allows us to rise above instinct. It gives us the power to respond, not react. It turns the noise down so that vision can rise. And when the world is wrapped in confusion, when every voice is louder than the last, clarity becomes the rarest and most valuable form of leadership. It becomes the light that cuts through darkness, the compass that guides through uncertainty, and the signal that steadies hearts amidst the storm. In moments of crisis, the world often looks upward. People scan the horizon for generals, presidents, commanders, and high-ranking officials, those assumed to hold the reins of leadership. We're conditioned to believe that leadership is reserved for those with titles, uniforms, microphones, and seats at polished conference tables. But that belief is not only outdated, it's dangerous, because it leaves too many people sitting on the sidelines, waiting for someone else to make the hard decisions, to speak up, to step forward. The truth is, leadership was never meant to be confined to the top. It lives everywhere in everyone, and it especially comes alive when the world is uncertain. In the wake of fear and global tension, we don't just need orders, we need examples. We need people who, regardless of their job title or their position in the world, decide to act with integrity, with purpose, and with courage. These are the quiet heroes, the parents who turn off the noise and teach their children how to stay grounded in truth. The teachers who remind their students that compassion and understanding are still values worth protecting. The business owners who prioritize people over profit in a time of global unrest. the everyday citizens who check on their neighbors, offer a hand, or speak peace when others speak panic. These are not just gestures, they are acts of leadership, and they matter. Leadership is not about visibility, it's about responsibility. It's about the mindset that says, if not me, then who? It's about recognizing that in every home, every community, every team, there's an opportunity to set the tone, to be the one who holds the standard when everything else is slipping. In times like these, we don't need more spectators. We need contributors. We need people who understand that waiting for someone else to lead is the fastest way to lose control of the direction we're headed in. When leadership is left only to the few, the rest feel powerless. But when leadership is embraced by the many, movements are born, resilience grows, and hope multiplies. Think about the defining moments in history. Think about the revolutions, the recoveries, the rebirths after catastrophe. Yes, there were prominent figures, but there were also millions of unnamed individuals who chose to lead in their own right. They didn't ask for permission. They didn't wait for applause. They simply acted with principle in the face of pressure. And because of them, progress didn't just happen, it accelerated. Now is a time that demands that same energy, not just from governments or global coalitions, but from you and me. The battlefield may be overseas, but the influence is local. The ripple effect of leadership begins wherever you are. When you show up with conviction, when you live out your values, when you choose to build rather than break, you become a leader, not by title, but by impact. And in moments like this, the impact of everyday leadership is not just important. It is vital to the future we hope to preserve. In times of global unrest, when the world feels like it's spinning out of control and everything we once believed to be stable starts to shake, the single most grounding force we can lean on is purpose. Purpose doesn't bend in the wind. It doesn't waver under pressure. It is the internal compass that gives direction when everything else is clouded by confusion and emotion. In the face of something as massive as a military strike and the rising fear of war, people are desperate for answers, for strategy, for reassurance. But beneath all of that, what they truly crave is a sense of asterisk. Why asterisk? A reason to stay strong, to keep moving, to continue believing in something bigger than the conflict itself. Purpose gives meaning to struggle. It transforms pain into progress. It reframes challenge as a calling, not a curse. And while fear isolates, purpose connects. It reminds us that we are part of something greater, that our actions, even the smallest ones, are tied to a broader mission. In crisis, the temptation is to focus only on survival, to slip into self-preservation mode. But purpose lifts our eyes from the immediate to the meaningful. It dares us to ask better questions, not just how do we get through this, but what do we stand for in this moment? And who do we choose to become on the other side of it? When people lose sight of purpose, they become reactionary, they start to drift, decisions become erratic, morale crumbles. But when purpose is clear, even the most difficult circumstances can be navigated with dignity and strength. History shows us that the most resilient individuals, teams, and nations were not necessarily the strongest or smartest, but the most anchored. They knew why they were enduring hardship. They had a vision of what they were building toward. And they held on to that vision no matter how intense the fire around them became. Purpose isn't just a personal asset, it's a leadership essential. When leaders operate with a strong sense of purpose, they don't just manage, they inspire. They remind people why their effort matters, why unity is essential, and why giving up is not an option. In moments of chaos, people don't follow plans, they follow belief. They rally behind values. They commit to something that transcends the fear, something rooted in the heart rather than in reaction. A clearly defined purpose becomes the emotional and strategic fuel to endure uncertainty. This isn't theoretical, it's practical. Purpose determines behavior. It influences how we speak to one another, how we support one another, how we make decisions that affect lives. It's what allows us to remain human in the face of inhuman events. It keeps leaders grounded, teams aligned, and people moving forward, even when the road ahead isn't visible. And perhaps most importantly, purpose gives us the strength to resist being pulled into the negativity and divisiveness that fear tries to spread. It helps us protect our integrity, our compassion, and our courage. When crisis strikes, the natural reflex is to tear down. In fear, people look for someone to blame. In anger, they lash out. In uncertainty, they retreat into extremes. Division becomes easy, destruction becomes tempting, and the louder the world gets, the more people start to believe that burning everything to the ground is the only way to feel powerful again. But there is a rare kind of leadership, one that doesn't fall for the trap of destruction. It is the leadership that chooses to build, to create, to rise, especially when it's hardest, because the true test of strength is not how much you can tear apart, but how much you can construct in the middle of collapse. We see it everywhere, the impulse to react with rage, to retaliate without thought, to divide people into enemies and allies based on fear-driven assumptions, but that impulse only brings more instability. It feeds cycles of pain, it multiplies suffering. Choosing to build instead of break is an act of defiance against that cycle. It's a refusal to let chaos win. Building means choosing discipline over impulse. It means responding with wisdom rather than emotion, and it requires a deep commitment to something greater than momentary satisfaction. It demands vision. Builders are not naive. They are not weak. In fact, it is far more difficult to construct than to destroy. It takes courage to have patience when others want immediacy. It takes resilience to choose collaboration when others are pushing division. It takes clarity to stay focused on what matters when everything around you is screaming for attention. But it is these builders, the quiet, persistent ones, who ultimately shape the future, not because they shouted the loudest, but because they laid down foundations when others were too consumed by fear to see past the present moment. The world right now is filled with pressure. It's in our headlines, our homes, our workplaces, our hearts. And in times of pressure, people look to anyone who offers direction. This is where the builders lead. They don't lead with fear. They lead with purpose. They show that progress is still possible, that creation is still meaningful, that unity is still a choice, and in doing so, they begin to inspire others to do the same. It starts with the smallest decisions, how we speak to each other, how we listen, how we treat those who disagree with us, how we respond when provoked. Every interaction is a chance to either build trust or break it. Every choice is an opportunity to either deepen division or promote understanding. The ripple effect is real. One act of integrity can inspire another. One moment of compassion can shift a culture. And the more we choose to build in our families, in our communities, in our businesses, the stronger we become, not in a show of brute force, but in the quiet confidence that we are shaping something that will last beyond the conflict, beyond the noise, and beyond the fear. The world is desperate for hope. In times of crisis, when global events spiral into uncertainty, when violence breaks the silence of diplomacy, and when the very mention of war dominates the headlines, hope becomes one of the most powerful, yet rarest forces in existence. It's easy to believe that hope belongs only to the dreamers, that it is a passive emotion reserved for those disconnected from reality. But the truth is, hope is not soft. It is not blind optimism. Hope is a decision. It is a courageous, active choice to believe in the possibility of a better future, even when the present feels dark and chaotic. And in moments like these, where fear saturates our culture and confusion clouds our minds, hope becomes leadership, hope becomes strength. To be a beacon of hope in a world gripped by fear is not about offering empty reassurances or ignoring the gravity of the situation. It is about embodying resilience in a way that reminds others of what is still possible. People don't just want leaders who understand the problem. They want leaders who still believe in the solution. They want to see that someone, somewhere, has not given up, and that belief can be contagious. When one person chooses to stand tall, to speak truth, to act with compassion, others feel empowered to do the same. That single act of leadership can ignite courage in dozens, hundreds, even thousands of others. Being the reason the world has hope doesn't mean having all the answers. It means having enough conviction to act even when the answers are unclear. It means showing up consistently, not because everything is fine, but because people need stability. It means refusing to let cynicism dominate the conversation. It means being the one who reminds others that fear does not have the final word, that destruction is not the only path forward, and that humanity still has the capacity to choose peace, growth, and unity. Every generation faces its own defining challenge, and the leaders who leave a legacy are not always the ones with the loudest voices. They are the ones whose actions gave people something to believe in again. They are the ones who stepped into the fire not to fan the flames, but to show others that it's possible to walk through it and come out stronger. They are the ones who didn't let darkness define them, but instead became the light. You don't need a global stage to become a source of hope. It starts in the way you speak to the people around you, the way you carry yourself when pressure is high, the way you refuse to mirror hate and instead lead with conviction. When others are losing faith, your calm becomes a statement. When others are afraid, your courage becomes an invitation. In the presence of chaos, it's often a single grounded individual who becomes the turning point for an entire group, who reorients the mindset from fear to purpose, and who makes people believe, just for a moment, that maybe, just maybe, we can still come together and choose something better.